Guys, have a look at this glorious sunshine. The UK is a beautiful place, a beautiful island full of lots of lovely things, whether it's the astounding, beautiful nature of the country or the amazing people that live here. There is a lot great about the UK. As a lifelong resident though, I have to say in recent years, it feels like the UK has fallen into a new state of, quite frankly, disrepair. Public services are crumbling, pay is just not what it should be, and quite frankly, what do people have to look forward to? And I aim for my channel to be about positivity, but to be positive we have to have realistic estimations. And we need to talk about some of the problems that we always face. One of them that we have here in the UK at the minute appears to be a sense of, quite frankly, short-termism, and I think it's one of those things that's really damaged the UK and its economy. Well, I suppose what I just said at the start of the video is a pretty big claim. What do I mean that short-termism killed the UK economy? Well, let's explain this. Let's talk about what I mean by this and look at what this looks like in the modern day. Of course, I'm going to be showing you a lot of the footage as I go around. And by the way, I think we're on the footage going to see some byproducts of this, like litter on the street. Now, of course, this is bound to happen anywhere, but let me tell you, I'm riding a bicycle now, and thank goodness I have these big mountain bike tyres, because if I didn't, I'd probably get a flat on all the glass and rubble. And yes, as I said earlier, this is just my opinion and my experience, but what I must say is it does appear to be the case. These are our public services, and they've all been cut back. Now this is all in terms of the hopes of cutting costs. That's our whole ambition, right? We want to cut costs so the country owes less debt. However, if we think about that for what it is, I think that's quite a short-term view. Now, whether it's personal finances or a whole country's finance, debt is never going to be a good thing. I do think though, the reason that most people would want to clear their debts is so they could have a nicer life overall, so they could live in a place where they don't have to worry about things. Now of course, personal finance and country finance are not necessarily the same. Actually, there's quite a bit of difference, as you'd expect. But let's think about this, right? Because the premise is kind of the same. You do things to have better ambitions and goals and results in the future. Now, if we were to relate this back to personal finance, if you guys were asked by someone to get as much money as you possibly could and do that every single month, I'm sure the approach that most people would take is to minimise their spending. You stop spending on things and you start saving all of that money. Now in the very, very short term that works well, you can get more capital in your hands. But long term, two things happen. You will have a worse quality of life because, you know, I've done it myself, you know, when I was a teenager and whatnot. You save all this money, you don't go out, you don't have these experiences, and you miss out on so much stuff. That's one element. And number two is you get bottlenecked, right? Because if you make £2 a month, you can only save £2 a month at best, which is good, but it's not a sustainable plan for growth. Ever since the financial crash, it seems that's what the UK's been a bit like, in the sense that it's about where can costs be cut. And you know, in my personal day-to-day life, we see this quite a lot. Services are down, the NHS is kind of on its knees. Potholes on the streets are crazy in a lot of the places in the UK, at least that I've been to. And like I said earlier, there's glass all over the street, which for someone, you know, riding a bicycle isn't a very pleasant experience. But I think this kind of goes back quite a long time. I think to talk about the initial trouble that we're having right now, we probably need to go back to maybe even the 1980s, where a lot of things were privatised and sold off relatively cheaply. Now that sounds like a good thing in the short term, and it is, like I just said. You can raise money, but on top of raising money, you also do one thing. You cut costs, which from the outset is a brilliant thing, right? If you're trying to bring your country up a bit, that's great. Sell everything off so we got more money and we have less maintenance to worry about at the same time. What a brilliant plan. And short term that works. But look at the long term view now, right? Look at certain markets which are in such a state, really, it's unbelievable. Now things like the NHS, for example, are a massive privilege. But with that being said, it's things that we've had for quite some time. And now that they come into such a state of disregard and disrepair, it puts a lot of people in a very difficult position in day-to-day life in the UK. Now again, the healthcare is one element, there's a lot more to think about, but A great one that I want to focus on in this video is also housing. The idea that everyone can own their own house and everyone should own a council house, for example. Short term, I think it works out well, but it only works out well if you treat housing as a necessity and not a financial commodity. Because so many people now own houses, and if people want to own houses, that's fine, I don't have a problem with it, but this is just the case. Whether people like it or not, it's simple supply and demand from economics. Because so many people own houses, and because houses are treated as a financial commodity, there's more of an incentive to not build new housing stock. Because people, especially the rich, want to see the value of their properties increase, and who wouldn't? It's going to get you richer. But that, if anything, widens the wealth gap that we have here in the UK. Those who can get into the asset ladder, whether that be houses, whether that be getting yourself some private healthcare, you are still going to have a great opportunity here. But for a lot of people, they don't get the privileges and the services that they want to use and that their parents and grandparents were able to use, and that is a terrible shame. But that's the objective truth of it, right? How is this, in my opinion, killing the UK economy? And again, it's just my opinion, but let's talk about it. Now, the UK is a great country. It's filled with very smart people, very ambitious people, very talented people. But as I spoke about in my video that went semi-viral to about 60k views, when people haven't got much to look forward to, they generally look to other means. So here in the UK, things are, like I say, quite tough. The smart people amongst us, whether it's due to qualifications or straight up ambitions, or where there's a will there's a way sort of mindsets, can find opportunities elsewhere. And I spoke about that in that video, so I don't want to speak about it too much here. But whether it's, moving to a much cheaper country, or somewhere, if they're more skilled, to earn more money. You guys told me in the comment section of that video how your guys' life has changed by moving abroad. But to have a competitive advantage, a country needs to play to its strengths, play to its skills. And in the UK, that could be the great education that we have access to, it could be the great talent that we have access to. And because of the way things are, people are incentivized to go elsewhere. And also people are decentivized in a way from doing stuff that could benefit them. For example, the amount of my friends and people that I know that will not or would not or could not go to university because of how very much it costs. Now again, in the early days, raising tuition fees is a good idea. It takes money away from the government having to spend, and they can spend it in other means. But quite frankly, this is not what we've seen. We've not seen the government spending it in other means or in other places. We've just seen this money get transported away from the likes of the normal people, and it's been put into the hands of the few. Now of course, I'm not here to talk political, but due to the fact that there's so many of these, admittedly, things that are luxuries, but these social measures, if you will, or there should have been, or there should be, to keep people safe from trouble, and whether that's financial or in health terms, these measures are there to keep people, all people, well and healthy. And when people are well and healthy, they're not worried about the basics of life. They're worried about what they can do, to improve. You can't worry about becoming something amazing with your life if your day-to-day struggle is just trying to pay for food, water, and your housing costs. It's not going to be easy to aspire to something big, because you've already got so much work to do to get the basics done. What I'm saying is, in my opinion, and people may disagree, but in my personal view, the government, the people above us, are there to help us. If you ask me, the solution that we need to approach, or the way that we need to look at this, is to invest. Invest in our young people, invest in our poorer people, invest in our services, give people something where they feel like the system, which is there to benefit them, not to benefit the few, it's there to benefit the many, the us, the people. Create a system, or bring back a system, more fair, where people feel like they can achieve something with their lives. Invest in people. It's going to cost in the short term, but long term, I think it's absolutely worth it, and I think it's the only way that we're going to get ourselves out of this mess, to invest in the people who need it the most. But in an attempt to minimise debt, in an attempt to reduce public spending, to me it seems like costs have been cut to a point where everything's been sold off. Big business runs so much stuff And let's talk about things like lobbying, where companies and governments discuss things, which often works in favour of these companies. Whether we talk about cronyism and money being siphoned off and being passed to the top, really, we are seeing all of these things here in the UK, and it's not had a good impact, really. It seems to have done nothing but created a massive wealth gap. And again, how that's killed the UK economy, in my opinion, it's given a lot of people nothing to look forward to. It's given a lot of people a much more hassle life. I mean, and it's also created a generation of people who just don't see themselves being able to play this game, even if they really want to. Because think about it, if the average house price in the UK is, and it is, well above 100, probably even well above 250 grand, especially in London, it's way crazier. But if your average house price is even over 100 grand, and your pay is 20 grand, or less, and it is less than that, and a house is not 100 grand, by the way, it's at least 150, and that's very low, then how do you ever have the ambition, the hope, the will to do anything more meaningful? And in terms of selling everything off to big companies, well, I don't think that's been too good either, really, for the people and for the country. Here now, in a lot of markets, big businesses control the prices, the quality, the products. And of course, a business should, do its business. It's what it does best. But not to a point where it affects negatively the average person. What I'm trying to say here is, selling things off for super cheap, cutting funding in the short term was a great way to raise capital. It was a great way to empower the person, the people, the man on the street. He can own his own house. He can, invest in a company very easily and probably make a decent profit on his investment. And that's great for the short term, but long term, the effect that it quite frankly has had, and I think most of my young people here will agree with me rather, is the fact that it's basically created a generation that cannot achieve what their parents could have. And again, it's not that a lot of people in the comment section of that popular video said, "Oh, it's because you kids are lazy." Maybe it is, but I don't think that's the sole excuse. Because I know for a fact there's a lot of people who are trying as hard as they can. But take away someone's ambitions in a country, take away someone's potential in a country, don't think it's going to make them into a lazy bum who just works for minimum wage and empowers the rich because, shareholders and big corporations run the whole market. That's not what's going to happen to you really smart people. They're just going to leave. Some of them will give up, but and I don't even think it's selfish, right? NHS doctors, why would someone be an NHS doctor? Why would you work for 30, 40 grand when you've worked 7 years minimum? I don't know the exact specifications, I'm not an expert and I'm not a doctor, but I wouldn't work for 7 years studying, no pay, hundreds of thousands of pounds of student debt because of privatization and the businessification of these are the people who've paid hundreds of thousands of pounds in student loans because the system's been made into a business. It's not about education anymore. It's about getting people to pay for a service. It's not what it once was. People are not happy with it. And again, to your common man on the street, or your educated people, especially people who are highly educated, they're not going to work for these low wages. They're going to be chased away and driven to places where they can do better for themselves, whether it's earning more and having higher living costs, or whether it's earning less and having higher living costs. I see this in my own friendship circle. I see this in a lot of the comment sections of the videos where I speak about things like this. People move to cheaper places or more expensive places where they get paid much better. They're going to do it. So in my view, and it is just my view, the eye on saving costs, the eye on not thinking about the long-term approach of what the people in this country need, has created a market where talented people don't want to work for this wage, and they shouldn't. I think it's created a market where we are going to be seeing, again, more and more people shifting away from the UK if this trend doesn't change. Better value can be found elsewhere. And whilst it seemed good to make everything private, whilst it seemed good to cut costs, we're walking around in the streets, not like this, because this is natural, or it's a nature kind of reserve, so I'm not going to say anything about the state of this, but even on the street, right, we're walking around in streets that are usually quite dirty, with litter. We've got social problems that could be resolved by a little bit of government investment. And when people see the low wages, you know, and the low quality of life relative to what you have to pay in terms of taxes and stuff like that, they're not going to do it. Or a lot of skilled people aren't doing it, and that's just the truth of it. I think the only solution to this is to pay more attention to the people who want to do well, right? Because, you know, certain people will never want to do well, but there's a lot of people here. It's not that they're lazy, it's that they don't get the ambition, they don't get the chance. It's just not like it was before. Give people something to look forward to, give people something that they can work towards and achieve, and a consequence, or a reward rather, for their hard work. We'll see people work a lot harder. But what we're seeing in the UK now is a decline in GDP, or a stagnant GDP, real term wages that are falling, and subsequently productivity for the last couple of years has been quite flat. Why are people going to work harder for less money? It's not going to happen. Anyway, that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, of course, I hope to see you again soon, and if you could subscribe, that'd be great. That's it for this one though. Thank you for watching.